Welcome to HeartChangeU Live. We're the next few weeks really focusing in on what we call our Living Hope outreach, where we are working to equip those who have loved ones who are struggling, whether it's with addiction or whatever dysfunction that is going on. And so often when you're living with that, obviously you've got the codependency that can go with that, but there's just so many questions of what do I do, how do I do, especially people who are high on the compassion scale. It's like they feel like they have to do something, they need to do something, and many times the things that they do end up being healthy. And so today we've titled it, Trust is a Process. And trust, I still think, is the most powerful word in recovery. But before I get into that, Kimberly, it's great to have you as always.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. And I'll tell you what, that was one of the things I was going to share at the retreat tomorrow, is that the first thing I heard when I wanted God to heal me, and he asked me, was, you have trust issues, Kim. And so now that I'm hearing you say that that's a process in the recovery, I can see why I heard that from the Lord at that time.
I believe it's the most powerful word. And some would use the word faith, but in our culture, in our language, I would choose the word trust as the most powerful word. And Rebecca,
hello.
It's great to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
Throwing you here to the wolves.
Yes.
Can you handle it?
It's going to work out.
We're sheep. We're not wolves.
Well, she was talking before of when I'm speaking, it's difficult, and I have to say that's not true because I've been around her, and I know that
I'm articulate. I just may stutter a whole bunch. So
no, I'm not worried about that at all. But let's jump back in with the whole idea of trust. If you think about it, and you think about the contradiction where there's woundedness, then to go from woundedness to get better, if trust is the most powerful word, the woundedness destroys the trust. And we're especially talking living hope today, so now we're reversing the roles. You have the person who is the parent, or sometimes the child to a parent. I mean, it can go both ways, or brothers or sisters, or all of the above. And it feels like the one who's being abused, the one who's being wounded, is that other person who's staying stable in the relationship. And so, but they have their own set of wounds. They have their own set of trust issues, if you will. It's kind of like, why is this happening to me? And so there's this whole set of issues they have to work out in order to be strong, and in order to be able to do what they need to do in order to help those. And most of the time, they're desperately wanting to help. They're desperately wanting to make a difference, but you have all this confusion and chaos, and as I said, then they have their own sense of woundedness, their own sense of rejection, their own sense of not being taken seriously, and all of that going on. It becomes a muddled mess as you have people working with these dysfunction areas. Not sure either of you. Go, Kimberly. You're used to jumping in. Well,
I was thinking of how we talked Tuesday about codependency, and now the word that I'm hearing as you're speaking is, and I want to ask you, what do you think when you're saying those trust issues for the person who you don't think has the wound, but has maybe a wound also? I'm hearing the word coping skills. So what would you say most common is maybe some coping skills that people like that would do, or pretend that they're not wounded, I guess, is something I'm thinking about too, that they act like, or maybe they don't realize they're wounded.
Well, you have all kinds of different pictures. So, I mean, and it can be totally opposite. On the one end, you can have a control response. And so people who are controllers, you can only be hurt by what you care about. If they're jumping in, and let's move it from the word control to influence, or to nurturing, or to caregiving. Let's give it a positive zone where they're genuinely wanting to do caregiving. They're genuinely wanting to make a difference, and all of those efforts are being rejected. If that's what you want to do, if you just want to be that caregiver, nurturer, and you're being rejected, that is pain. And so it's interesting they end up having almost as much woundedness, pain, struggle on their end as the person who's on the addiction end. And of course, the person on the addiction end is kind of like they see them as judges, or they see them as controllers, or they see them as goody two-shoes, or whatever other language you want to use. And so the person on the addiction end can't relate to anything the other person's going through. But I'm telling you, the pain, the trauma is just as real on the other end of the addict as it is within the addict themselves.
Yeah, that's excuse me. That's what I've recently been going through. That I didn't realize how often I've got very much dysfunction, and had learned to hide it or whatnot. But that's what God had shown me through the story of Isaac and Rebecca. I'd never heard it in a way that Rebecca had meddled in her son's life, because she heard that prophecy, and so she's just helping out and moving this along in God's way. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's what I do, like, all the time, because I'm trying to help. But then it got deeper, because what I actually realized was because of my past and previous abuse, that what I was trying to do was control people so that if they were happy and content, then, because my abuse seemed to happen when people were upset or whatnot. And so I just, but look at me, I'm so pleasant, I'm just helping. And it wasn't, and so it's interesting, that we're going down that. But I mean, that's what it was. I had such a big area of my life that I wasn't trusting God with, because I learned how to protect myself. And
if you listen to what you're saying, what was instinctive, what was down inside of you was, if I'm happy and if I'm cheerful, that happy and that cheerful should rub off on you, and the best way that I can impact you is to be happy and cheerful in your presence.
Right.
So then when you're happy and cheerful in their presence, and they're angry and they're bitter and they're coming back and they're making accusations, that's incredibly crushing for you.
Yeah, it was. So, but finding this way to how much I can let God do instead of, it's not my job. And I didn't even understand that I was doing it. So now I can stop.
Well, and part of it is we all do instinctively what we do. Mm-hmm. You were following your instincts. You were doing what felt like was the right thing to do. You were doing what felt like it should be helpful. It should make a difference. When I'm around people and they're in a good mood, it makes a difference for me.
Yeah.
If I'm doing that for you, it should make a difference for you.
Right. And I was just being a helper, so it was fine.
And we see that, and a lot of times, I love this word, a lot of times we're doing things that make sense to us, seem to be the right thing, and it actually isn't helpful.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There are, I love the scripture, and I don't have it referenced in verse, but all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful for me. I mean, Paul talking about with the death of Christ, I can eat this food now, or I can do this thing now because the ceremonial law has been fulfilled. So I'm no longer under bondage to that now, and so now I have the freedom to choose. It's lawful, but it's not necessarily helpful. Mm-hmm. And that ends up, again, that whole concept here. There are a lot of things that being cheerful should be helpful. It should be a good thing. And you're over here meaning well, and the person's getting grumpier and angrier by the moment, and at some point it becomes personal to you, to where it's like, wow, now I'm the wounded one. Now I'm feeling beat up and destroyed.
Yeah.
I know for me what you're talking about, trying to make everybody in the room happy and content and smiling and laughing. For me, it was really a deflection and a cover-up so that people wouldn't notice my wound or my pain that I was going through. And the first time I recognized that was with my family. And I walked in and they go, oh, good, Kim's here. Now we can all have fun and cheerful. And I was so down that it was the first time I couldn't do it. And I was broken, and I just said, I can't do it. I said, you're going to have to deal with me the way I am. And they all were like, oh, well, now what are we going to do? The other thing I'm hearing you say, like, I'm thinking of someone who's been also betrayed, or, abused in some way in, let's say, an affair or things like that, and then that person wants to come back. And from my own experience, I have seen people who, for that person that was wounded by that, I see them just fixated on checking that person's phone, checking through the drawers to make sure that there isn't something in there, looking for photos, and that has to be very painful for that person. And then to allow that person back into their life, say, we're going to work on this. The trust issue is really, really broken in that. And it's hard for the person that wounded them, because maybe they left because of their wounded past, what's happened to them. So then they do the very same thing, and then they've wounded that spouse or that mate or loved one or whoever it is. And then that person begins to have very serious trust issues. And the person who did it to them can't understand why this person is saying, this is going to take some time. I don't trust you anymore. And how long does it take? Some people have asked, as long as it takes. I don't know the answer to that. What would you say?
Well, you can answer that. You can answer that in terms of, you think about how long it actually has taken for you compared to what you thought it would take. I mean, you were fighting through a bunch of different issues, and as you were fighting through those issues, it was just, I don't know how many times on this program I've heard you say, oh, wow, I thought I was over that. I thought that was done. Oh, it's back again. I'm still having to work through it. And then over the last 6 months especially, it's kind of like, oh, wow, I got a breakthrough here. Oh, I got a breakthrough here. And so it's like you don't even know that you're getting freedom until you get the breakthrough. So, my answer is years. I mean, and people don't want to hear that. They want something that's a quick fix. But depending on the depth of the wound, it can be a long, long time.
Right. I believe that. And I think that when people say it is a quick, easy fix, that's not being honest and loving to people. That's a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, I do believe God can come in and just heal up, but we've talked about it a long time. Wounding is deep and painful. And what I can actually say is a lot of my wounds have been healed, specific ones that I'm aware of since I've been on this program. But I also know that there's still a scab on it. I'm not going to pick at it, but there's going to be a scar to show for what happened to you. And that effect probably never goes away. Maybe it does. You can change your actions. That's, kind of what I'm realizing now, is that once that wound has been healed, then it's almost like in my heart, I have this wanting to change my actions, seeing the difference in it, wanting to change.
Match.
Yes.
Yes.
And asking God to help me with that. And so that I can trust again and not be fearful. And I think one of the things that's happened here is with you, Pastor, is that not trusting men because of what happened. I trust you fully. Just from spending this time one-on-one, working with the healing process, whatever it's been, it does cause trust. And it's funny because I was praying this morning and I thought, man, I really trust Pastor Case. I really trust him. And I could say it honestly. And when I did, I heard the Holy Spirit say, but remember, he could still hurt you at some point. Are you going to still care for him and love him? People make mistakes,
Right.
and I want you to change your thinking on this.
And I would actually make it stronger than that. I not only could
You
do that, I'm relatively certain that I will do
Yes.
it at some point, simply because of what we're talking about. You've got the person who is the addict, or you brought up again, you've got a sexual situation and you've got betrayal. The person who is seemingly the victim isn't the only one with pain in that situation. So you have your whole set of things that you care about very deeply. I have my whole thing, areas that I care about deeply. At some point, we're not going to see each other. And I'm going to simply be doing my thing, just like you've got a person in the room working with an addict who is not meaning to, but pain is being caused by the judgments and et cetera, et cetera. all things are lawful, it's not all things are helpful. They think they're doing the right thing. They're doing what Rebecca said. They're just being cheerful. How can you get offended at me being cheerful? And they're, depending on how closely we work together, there will be some point where there's just, I'm just in my world doing what I'm doing, and you're like, how can he say that?
Yeah.
How can he do that? Why did he do that? I mean, that's just normal life.
This is leading into me when I married Jeff. I wanted him, I was insisting of him that he would promise to never hurt me. And it infuriated me. If you could have seen how angry I got, he said, I cannot promise you that. And I blew up like I've never blown up. And it was one of the first arguments we ever had. And I said, how can you not promise me that? I've been hurt so many times and I need to trust you. And he goes, if I make you that promise, I'll be lying to you. And that's not the truth. And I want you to know I will end up hurting you. You'll end up hurting me. It's what do we decide to do with it?
Yeah.
Amen. If you'd tried to get me to do that, I would have said, I will make you a promise. I will hurt you.
Yeah.
Now, I can make you a promise that I will not, I will do my best to never intentionally hurt you.
Right.
Or if I am hurting you, and let's just use that language for a moment. There are times that the only way you actually can challenge someone to get better is to bring truth, and part of bringing truth is pain. And so I will never intentionally hurt you in a way that is harmful. I can make that kind of a commitment to you, and I believe that on a relatively consistent basis, I can go there, but I'm human. At some point, I can be angry. That anger can overflow in a way that I didn't have self-control. So I can't even make that promise to you.
Yeah, I think what I found different in my relationship with my husband now is my abusive husband stuff never said he was sorry, never came back and said, forgive me. When you realize that maybe you have done something wrong or hurt someone and you realize you didn't mean to, you can go back and say, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to do that to you. Jeff will sometimes say, I'm not sorry for what I said. I still believe the way I do, but I'm sorry that it affected you the way it did. I love you, and so we're kind of in that agreement from now on.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you've been the silent partner. Anything you want to jump in with?
I don't know. I know where, I mean, because I know I'm going to fall short, but God's really been working on me, on my parenting, and I got a 5-year-old, and I love the partnership that God wants with us, and how I'm learning that he wants to walk. And so when I feel myself going to be short or whatnot, I'm like, God, I don't have enough love to give right now. Like, I need you to pour into me your love so then I can love this child the way you see fit, because he's not really my kid. I'm borrowing him, you know?
One of the things I would say about you, again, you are hyper in that area of being loving and being caring and being nice. And frankly, I'm going to go back to what I said in response to her. I really could never, I can't make that promise to you that I will never hurt you, because let's go to a 5-year-old. If you don't hurt a 5-year-old, and again, I'm not talking physically harm or abuse or etc., but if you don't hurt their feelings at some point, you're not doing good parenting. And there are those times when 5-year-olds want what they want, and that they're the center of their own world, and the only way that you're actually being a good parent is to create pain in their world. A lot of times we don't think about that, and especially someone like you who is in the nice category. I'm not in the nice category. I'm over here on the other end of it. But who's in the nice category? That's one of the things you have to really almost bring back into your brain on a consistent basis, that no, I can't promise I will never hurt you. In fact, I need to bring some level of confrontation, pain.
Well, and that's what Paul sat the other day, and I had yelled at him, and he was very upset about that, because he's stand like sometimes, and he's like, well, sometimes we both have to say sorry. Ooh. And so I'm hoping to, I mean, I'm a human. I'm gonna mess up, and eventually. But
That goes to the whole codependency. The most powerful word is trust. So whether it's a mother and a child, whether it's a parent with an addict, now all of a sudden what we've established pretty clearly is there's pain on both sides. And a lot of times, there's not a recognition that there's pain on both sides. So there's a need to walk through that pain. And pain, by definition, makes it hard to trust because what? We don't want to go through pain.
Right.
And if we anticipate pain, our ability to trust is radically minimized at that point. So I have this let's just stay with the classic. I've got a parent with a child who is an addict. And we're trying to work through that process. What are the kinds of things that we need to think about? I'll put it out as a question. Yeah, I know you guys will throw it back at me. But what are the things that we need to think about that would destroy the trust between that parent and that child? What are things that might be done, might be said? It's not necessarily wrong, but it's not helpful. Let's just talk about that.
Taking them in each time they lose their place of living. I think that's, a big one.
Okay, let's just start there. Codependency 101, where when they're at a point of failure, I automatically come to the rescue. And so that's codependency 101. Yes, I can't stand to see you suffer. And so if you're suffering, you come in, and who knows, maybe this time will be the time. And so if this time is going to be the time, why, hallelujah, we're getting it back where it needs to go. And so that's, again, what is the instinctive response? The instinctive response at that point is to take them in. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful.
Yeah.
I kind of was thinking back to when I was younger, like my parents, and we were dysfunctional. So, but what I think caused distrust between my parents and I is the lack of follow through. Them telling me something and then not doing it. I began to realize I can't trust you. And I know that one of the things my dad would say, even to Jeff, was, I'm going to tell you one thing about Kim. If you tell her something, you better do it. And I thought, what an odd comment, because you never did. So whether it was a good thing that was going to happen, we're all going to go to the fair tomorrow, and then we didn't. I thought, I can't trust you. You tell me things and then you don't follow through. Or if you were going to punish me and then didn't do it. And that sounds funny, but kids need that. Like if their parents talk to them and tell them something, and I tell my girlfriends that all the time, it is very important not to say something to your kids. I even worked when my kids were younger to, if I thought we were going to do something the next day, I never told them until the morning or we really were going to do it, so that they wouldn't be disappointed and that they could believe what I was telling them.
Concept that I have in my notes, I talk about long-term trust and short-term trust. And so it's really important here. And when I'm hearing what you're talking about with, and I use the word integrity, but follow through, absolute follow through, absolute consistency. You cannot establish long-term trust without that kind of integrity. And in fact, I have this verse I have down in my notes. One of the most important lessons is to learn to measure words very carefully. Again, I'm talking for the one who has an addict that they're working with. You learn to measure your words very carefully. You don't make promises. You don't automatically agree that you're going to take that child back in, that you're going to be there to rescue them. I'll always be here for you. A lot of times parents will say something like that. Well, you have a home here. You have a place here. Well, about the third time of rescuing, and we understand that this is highly toxic and it's not going to be helpful, I no longer can do that. Well, I've made a promise that you will always have a place here. I've made a promise that I will always be there for you. Oh, you aren't trustworthy. You don't have integrity. And so just give the verse. It Proverbs 10:19, it says, in the multitude of words, sin is not lacking. And one of the things, but he who restrains his lips is wise. That's the rest of the Proverbs. One of the most powerful things that I can tell the person who's on the codependent side, that's on the rescuing side, that's on the I have that, shut your mouth. Because you're going to tend to want to say something that's sympathetic. You're going to tend to, you're going to have all these different tendencies. And what's going to happen then, at some point, those words are going to show back up in your face that you said you would, and you didn't.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm always, I know live life and listen to me to learn things, please. And God's really been like, can you just stop talking so I could be God? Like, just let me be God. And so I hear you very loud because it's real. Me just trying to help.
And again, having problems with mics today. Go ahead and adjust yours back up again there and try to tighten that down. And it's interesting. That's probably one of the early lessons that I learned. Early on, and again, some programs are what I call a one strike and you're out type of a program. And if you're a one strike and you're out kind of a program, that means that you use, you're kicked out. Well, we're not, and what I do, and I actually would encourage people to adopt this if you have addictive children. Are you willing to do what you need to do to get better? I mean, that is a huge, huge question. So I'm not automatically going to receive my child back. I am only willing to receive my child back if A, you're willing to do what you need to do to get better, and B, you're not going to come in here and destroy the environment. I'm not willing. I have other children. I'm not willing to have you come in and destroy the home environment for the children who are still in the home. And so you have those kinds of pieces. Well, early in the program, I can remember, doing the noble, loyal thing. You do that and you're out of here. And I can remember a person, they used, and at that point, after the usage, taking into account the entire story and looking at the entire picture, I'm just like, but I don't want to kick this person out. I don't think they're done. I don't think I'm done. And then just having to look myself in the mirror. But you absolutely told them, if you did this, it was over, and so I'm having just this fight within myself at that point of, you said it, you have to follow through on it.
Can you apologize and say, I was wrong? I shouldn't have made that statement? I mean, is that...
You can.
Or because of a place of authority, it's not appropriate?
Well, it's easier to do that if you're dealing one-on-one. But in sets of eyes, in our case, 50 plus sets of eyes that are watching you at that point.
Okay.
And so if you have made a clean, clear statement like that, there's not a lot of room to back up.
Okay.
And part of what I'm talking about here, in the end, what will make a difference more than anything else is not the short-term trust, it's the long-term trust.
Right.
So if I'm not really watching my words and I'm not thinking through these processes, and the most powerful question that you ask yourself is, what am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? And again, with your children, at some point, I'm more than willing to take you back in. Oh, I'm not willing, and it's important for us to verbalize this to ourselves. I'm not willing to have the entire atmosphere of the house destroyed. I'm not willing to have things stolen from me. I'm not willing to, and the list just goes on and on, have my other kids compromised. I'm not willing. When I walk through that and I think through all of those kinds of things, now can I move back in, all of a sudden I've got a whole series of things, and I'm not going to answer that quickly. I'm not going to immediately say, absolutely not. Do you know what you did to me the last time you were here? And rampage. Okay, that will absolutely destroy. I'm going to call it the short-term trust. You can't develop long-term trust without developing short-term trust. So if you're not nice, and you've got that part down, if you're not nice, And if you're not able to walk it through with a gentleness and a consistency, et cetera, on the front end, you don't ever get the chance to build the long-term trust. But if you're not aware of what I'm talking about, we make statements, we make promises that totally destroy the long-term picture. So, and especially in your case, the nice tends to win, and you're not necessarily thinking about some of these other things. You're not thinking about the bigger picture. And so then next thing you know, and I bet you've had it happen, the kids start coming at you, well, you said, and then at that point you're kind of looking in the mirror going, oh yeah, I did say that. Now what do I do? Now I'm in a double bind.
Yeah. So I kind of hear boundaries with that too. I mean, and what's a good way to establish those boundaries? I mean, having mentors to be able to talk to and bounce ideas off. I love being intimate enough with other people to watch how they do it. That's how I learn the best. Because somebody could tell me to do something and I'm like, I don't know what that meant.
Well,
So.
I'm going to start with very clear, almost harsh language. Don't make promises.
Oh, of course.
So that's 101.
Mm-hmm.
Where invariably with addicts, they are going to escalate. They are going to demand. They're going to try to get you to make a promise. They're going to try to get you to make a statement. Then they will try to use that promise. They will try to use that statement. I have never learned how to hedge my bets, so to speak, so much as when I'm talking with addicts, because they will immediately, they'll come at me and they're trying to get something out of me. And so just slowing that process down and asking more questions and just fighting through that process. And again, the nice person is kind of like, I can't not give them something. We've got to ease the tension. We've got to slow this down. We've got to do the short-term thing. No, you don't have to do the short-term thing. What I will tell you, in the end, the long-term will actually be more significant in the recovery process than the short-term.
Well, I just read here, you have a comment that says the appropriate thing to say is, we will talk about that later, or I don't think it is helpful to go there right now. And that's one of the things I've learned to do on the phone with people that I realized have kind of bullied me through the years and pressured me to do things. And I began to learn that technique by the phone. I just would say, let me think about that. Let me get back with you. Started to make those not promises because I found myself overwhelmed with things that people were expecting me to do. And then I felt like I have to do it. I have to do it. I have to do it because I told them I would. And so I think these questions that you have here are really good. I'm also hearing, as you're talking, consistency is a big thing, being consistent. And I can think of one of my kids at my house with the four of them when they were there, just slamming through the house and slamming the doors when they're angry and pushing each other, you know. And I had to sit them all down and say, look, I went through an abusive relationship with your dad, and I am not going to have that in my home anymore. I won't allow it, and I mean it. And if you continue to do it, you won't be able to stay here. And on that point, I really did mean it. And they knew. They told me they always knew when I meant something because I had a different look on my face. But I had to be stern on certain things to keep that peace. And then I had to be consistent in what I was saying to them. And it's very difficult. I mean, it can come down to the smallest thing as your little kid coming in and going, I want a cookie. No, you can't have a cookie. Mm-hmm. Then they come back in and they ask 3 times and the mom gives it to them. No, yeah. I want to tell that mom, no, you're teaching them already not to trust your word and what you're saying to them. So,
yeah, I mean, that's incredibly powerful. And I come back to the most significant language I teach are these 2 phrases. I am willing, I am not willing. Because if you go back to, you've got to know who you are, what your boundaries are, where you will stand, where you won't stand. All the time I talk about, a lot of times people are, well, if you have a strict home, you'll turn out really good kids. And then other people say, well, if you have a strict home, you'll have terrible kids. And no, if you have just a loving, very caring, gracious home, you'll turn out good kids. Well, you can have a loving, caring, gracious home with no boundaries. We had a person who I pastored, two of the most incredible people you'll ever meet. Loving, merciful, gracious, committed Christians. But every time their kids did something wrong, the response was, we'll just pray about it. And every time they prayed about it, they came to the conclusion, well, we'll just forgive them. And basically their kids were a disaster. So you can have a loving, caring home and turn out awful children. You can have an incredibly strict home. What's interesting, what creates psychotic, messed up kids is when you have one parent strict and one parent loving. That absolutely, it creates a level of neurosis in the children that is just off the charts. And so I don't care what level, now strict can become ugly strict, et cetera. But I don't care which level you set it at. What is really important is this integrity, consistency. So, okay, you're going to let the kid have a cookie. Oh, you're going to let him have 2 cookies. Oh, you're going to let him have 3 cookies. Okay, but all of that's fine. The issue is you don't know what you're willing to do. You don't know what you're not willing to do. Now we have inconsistency. And maybe you're inconsistent from one day to the next. Well, at least recognize your inconsistency then, so that you can say, you know what, I'm in a generous mood today, so you have your 3 cookies. You know what, I'm not in a good mood today. You better not even think about asking for a cookie today, okay? I mean, if you can't be consistent, at least acknowledge where you are so that you can tell other people what's going on with you, so that we can have a quality relationship. I mean, but it's really important that there is probably nothing more significant than for a person to really look in the mirror and begin to go, I am willing to, I'm not willing to, and they begin to sort out all of these different things to where now you're there. Now, then what happens when the emergency comes at you? You don't have time to sort all of that out. So what do? You know you don't have time to sort it out. You know you don't know what you're willing to do. You know you don't know what you're not willing to do. So you learn these devices to slow it down. And no, I am not going to be forced into a commitment here that I'm not willing to back up.
Yeah. Oh, I just I think with this, a lot of the times if I have that rushed or whatnot, like there was a little meme or something that said like God's voice is calm and Satan's voice rushes you. And so anytime I have those, I'm like, no. Like even them talking to me that way or whatnot, like I'm not at peace right now. I can't, it's a good way to calm it down.
And I love what you said there, and what I talk about over and over again. We tend to think inside of where we are spiritually. So I know that if I'm not at peace right now, it's virtually guaranteed my decision will be wrong or will be bad. So if you can develop that integrity to where, no, I absolutely cannot respond right now. I will not respond. I will not respond until I get counsel. I will not respond until I've prayed. I will not respond until I'm in a place of peace and rest about my response. No, I will not. Yes, I used to respond this way. Yes, I used to do this, but you know that I've made changes. You know that I'm not who I was. So no, these are the new boundaries. These are the new rules. I mean, that's an incredible statement.
Well, and I think, I mean, it's a little illustration, but I had somebody that I was going to bring to house church, and I just invited them because it just seemed like the thing to do. But man, I had all kinds of anxiety afterwards, and I was like, I can't invite you. I have to uninvite you. And they were very sassy to me and really attacking me, and what kind of love is that and whatnot. And I had to just no, I know God, I have peace now. And then the person later came back and they were like, yeah, I heard God tell me that too. I just didn't want to listen. So, but it's been a great tool to use.
And those are hard because what used to be your tool was, I want everyone to be happy. Yeah. I want everyone to feel
included
good.
And
and included. And so the old you that was your criteria. That was how you made decisions. And so the old you, I'm not willing for you to be sad. And because I'm not willing for you to be sad, I will make all of these different kinds of decisions. Well, there's a problem. You don't have the ability for another person to not be sad.
Right.
And so in essence, what we don't realize when we're there is we're playing God. That's a form of stepping into something. I don't have that ability. I just have the ability to be healthy and bring healthy. And
I'm loving this conversation. It may go on for a couple hours with all the little things I'm writing. I was going to go back to what you said, but I want to say with what I just heard Rebecca say, I'm hearing compromising.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big word too that people do when they're trying to do, or I've even heard don't do that. Felt bad for the other person because I wanted to include them. Compromised my own thing that I knew I was supposed to do to try to make them happy, and it's turned into a big blow up.
Right.
To where I should have never compromised in the first place. I have a question because I've been dealing with a friend and I've been talking to her a lot. Oh, go ahead. You want the compromising.
Hold that and let me
Yeah.
say something about compromising. When I talk about I am willing, I'm not willing, there's a gray area in the middle of I don't know. And depending on what the compromise is, you might be willing to allow that compromise to kind of hang out in that I don't know area, and where you literally tell the other person, you know what, I'm in a gray area here. I don't really know where I'm at. I don't know where I'm going to land. So, you know what, for right now, I will give you that space. And so there can be a compromise area that actually is healthy. And that compromise area is the I don't know. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm going to land yet. But what's usually more healthy in that is I don't know yet. Can we delay it? Delay is it's the most powerful tactic that I've come up with. You know what? I don't have an answer. You're on your own until I get an answer, until I pray. I'm not willing to act until I get an answer, et cetera. But that middle I don't know zone, a lot of times is kind of a compromise area. So when you said that, I was like, you know, it's not. We eventually want to get to I am willing and I'm not willing. But there's that zone there where you don't know. Okay, jump back in.
Okay, so going back to talking about kids, and you were talking about the consistency. So I've been dealing with a friend who, with their kids and the family situation, and I'm just going to ask you, it's very important, I've been telling her, for the couple to be on the same page. You were talking about a psychotic child, and when the couple doesn't come together and one has this idea how it ought to go and the other has an idea of this way, and then this thing barrels in on them and they don't have any plan or conversation together about how they're going to handle it when that addict or prodigal or whoever you want to call wants to come back in. I have literally seen lots of families where the one parent wants to have them back in, the other one is putting their foot down, going no way. They haven't come to a compromise, and the only word I can think of, you'll have one, is then it causes this child to become kind of a player, for lack of a better word, trying to play both sides to get what they want, you know. And so how would you tell parents to get on that same consistency or plan so that it doesn't do that and cause fights?
To be honest, that actually would go back to kind of a marriage 103. It's not 101, but one of the things that should happen at marriage is adopting the same vision and really getting on the same page. And so that goes all the way back there. But I would say the exact same thing we were saying before that. If the two parents aren't on the same page, generally the basic answer needs to be no. We can't act yet. And so you do everything you can to delay the process. You do everything you can to slow down the process. hopefully you're dealing with faith parents, and if you're dealing with faith parents, let's slow it down. Let's actively pray. What does actively praying look like? What does actively engaging with God and with one another? Because ultimately that's what you want. You want God to speak, and you want both parties not to be committed to my solution is better. You want both parties committed to what is God saying, what is God doing. If you can get it to that level, then we have a basis to go there. Ultimately, if we can't get it to that level, then I'm going to start down a level of destructive, not destructive. I mean, I'm going to start through some practical steps of trying to figure out which way do I go. I can remember we had a particular instance. I dealt with a couple who they had a son who had been through multiple treatment programs, and he had finally bought into a particular treatment program, and it was going to be another $25,000-$30,000 or whatever the numbers were, and one of the spouses was, we have to do this. What if this is time? And the other spouse was, we've already burned $100,000 or whatever the number was, and I'm not willing to do this one more time. And my advice on that one came down to this. When I was speaking to the one, I said, look, I do not believe it is worth it to burn your spouse's conscience. And somewhere along the line, my advice on that particular case, now this is not universal, but it was like, if your spouse has to take one more step in order to feel like I've done everything I need to do, for you to ask your spouse to violate that, I think is a bad choice. And I happen to agree with you that I think the odds are slim. I have to agree with you that I believe that the chances are good that it will be a failure, and et cetera. But for both of you to be able to look at God and look in the mirror and feel like you did everything that you needed to do, could do, I think it's worth it. But then I get back to what Rebecca would say, and to that particular thing. The spouse who wants everyone to feel good would honestly say, my conscience doesn't feel right unless I do this. So then you have to learn a little bit more about conscience, and you have to understand that your conscience comes out of your core values, comes out of who you are in conjunction with your life experiences, and then you throw a layer on there of moralistic teaching. You've got all of these pieces, and so there will come a point at which someone like Rebecca could never get to the point to where her conscience was in a good place. And so guess what? She's going deeper and deeper into dysfunction, and she's harming her kids, and et cetera. There does come a point where, no, you have to address the conscience of your spouse and help the spouse overcome the conscience issues. But in the particular case we were talking about, I felt like, no, it was legit. It was there. And so, no, honor the conscience of your spouse. What do you think, Rebecca? Did I throw you under the bus, or are you okay?
No, I'm fine. I was really, that's why I've got one kid at home and one kid I won't let back, but one child is pregnant, and that pregnancy, like that baby doesn't, like, that's my core that says I don't even know what I'm willing to do or not do. These are good questions that I'll have to reflect on later. But all I knew was that baby wasn't going to be exposed to more potential.
And so you end up with I am willing, I'm not willing, and you're walking through that process. And so, wow, now you talk about confusion. And if there's one thing I would say, having worked with addicts, a lot of times I come from what I would call a more fundamentalist type of a thinking, i.e. the Bible's the Bible, and yes means yes and no means no. And so you should be able to take the scriptures and extrapolate, this is exactly what you do in this situation. You want to totally boggle your mind, start working with addicts in terms of, okay, yeah, you can come in and demand that they do everything okay, go take that tattoo off your skin. You know, I mean, you start through all the different stuff, and at some point you begin to realize, wait a minute, let's start with first things first. Let's be reasonable. Let's take the right steps. And so once you begin to do that, you begin to realize, yeah, I believe in scriptural principles, and yes, we need to get there, and yes, I want to apply them, but there's about 5 of them going on right here, and I don't know which one to apply, and I don't even know how to apply it. And so, yeah, you get into those zones where, no, should not allow this child to be here. But wait a minute, no, got a baby. Wow, now what do I do? And frankly, especially when you're dealing with addiction, it gets real messy. And so then, no, I don't know what I'm willing to do, and I don't know where I need to draw boundaries, but you need to be thinking about it and start trying to figure it out.
And they're good questions, because that was one of the things that I was going to ask, is how do I even start when I don't even know the right questions to ask, but that's good. What am I willing to do, and what am I not willing to do? Those are good.
It's a really important question.
That's helped me a lot. And you're talking about the conscience, you know. I think for me, because I was people pleasing, I just want everybody to feel good because I was in such pain. And I think for me, it was really a wonderful experience when I did say, no, I'm not willing to do that. And I said no, and my conscience felt good.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked that it could feel good saying I'm not going to do that, because I'd spent all my life saying, yeah, yes. There was no in my vocabulary, actually, hardly. So it was a big change for me.
One of the most significant issues is identity. And I say it over and over again. If I could just, pop open the heads and pour in self-worth, and, okay, put the head back down. Okay, we're good. Addiction's fixed. A part of identity is me understanding this is who I am. This is who, now I'm going to use different language, but it's very important language. This is who God created me to be. This is who God called me to be. Once I know who I am, who God created me to be, once I know my calling, now I have some definition. Now I have some boundaries. Now I'm not just responding to those feelings of, I'll feel bad if I have to tell you no. That's one way of doing that. But when I start understanding my identity, I start understanding my calling, now I'm able, I have an objective standard, if you will. I have an objective standard by which I can say, because this is who I am, because this is what I'm called to do, no, I can't do that. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to spend money that way. I need the money over here, or whatever language that you want to put into it. But a lot of what's happening for you is you are beginning to see who you are. You're getting your identity. As you get your identity cleaned up and cleared up, then it's much easier for you to go, no, not who I am. Doesn't fit my calling.
Yep.
Nope, not willing to go there. And when your worth is intact and your identity is there in that particular place, it's much easier to be clean. If I'm clean in those boundaries, now I'm starting to build long-term integrity. Then eventually, as that gets in place, now I can come back, and now I can actually do the short-term thing in a way where I'm nicer, I'm more gentle, because I'm not confused, I'm not angry, I'm not making promises I shouldn't be making. And so I'm starting to clean up the short-term thing. And it makes all the difference in the world in terms of, okay, now I can begin to be a positive influence.
Yeah, the 2 words I hear myself say now is, I just feel very, very more focused in a direction that I know God wants me to go. And some people aren't in that direction with me. And I'm willing to let them go because I want the direction that God has for me.
And aren't you glad that one of those directions is I get to talk?
Yes. I was told to not talk and shut up. So, and I like your shut up part, because I have heard the Holy Spirit say, don't say a word right now. And so that's wisdom. But I feel like I'm not fixated on 100,000 different things. I'm fixed on who I am, and it feels good to be me, which I could say never before would I ever say that, because for me to say that anything was good in me or good in my life or anything. But it feels good to be who I am, and it feels good to know that God has a plan for my life. And like you're saying, you know, trying to be kind, I tried to include everyone. I was the girl in the study hall that, boy, if I didn't go over and talk to every person at every table, they were going to feel like they weren't important, and I had to be the one to do that. I don't feel that way anymore. It's okay if God wants you in my life. I realize some people are maybe a chapter of my life and other people are the long term, and I have to be willing to let people go and let God and trust God. That's what, to take care of them and do what He wants with them also.
And again, that need, love the word, that need to talk to absolutely everybody comes out of a root of insecurity. And so when I become more in touch with who I am, I'm able to rest in who I am. I don't have to be all things to all people. I get to be me. That's incredibly powerful in terms of being able to, the people I do go to, I get to have a really positive impact in. And that's cool because I'm able to pour life into them to a much greater degree.
Yeah, and I used to think it had to be one-on-one, and even before I started doing this with you, when I was praying one day, I heard Kim, what if I told you you don't go one-on-one with every single person, and what if I told you you're going to be speaking and you'll reach more people, but you won't be going one-on-one with them? And I couldn't get what it meant, but now I can see I'm going to be speaking, doing these events, and I'm speaking to everybody all at once, not
Amen.
just me trying to wear myself out to make sure they're all happy.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I wanted to think that everything I was doing for people was making them happy, when in reality, I can't make everybody happy. And that was really a struggle I had. I wore myself out physically trying to make everyone happy. And guess who wasn't happy? Me.
Amen.
So once you get happy and you get the joy of the Lord, it's effortless that way, and it just happens then. It's not my job to make people happy.
Well, Rebecca, you happen to sit at the seat with two people who talk a lot.
That's okay.
Any final thoughts?
No, I think we hit some really good points, and I'm grateful to be here, and this has been fantastic. But I like I said, I'm going to definitely take the home. What am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? Those are big. So.
I want to encourage you. I actually got a text message last week, about a week ago this time, saying, hey, got a person with a son at college and out of control, and do you have anything to share with them? That's why we do these things. We do these messages because they're very practical. They really speak into situations, give people tools to work with. Help us out. You know people who could benefit from listening to a program like we just talked about, and pass it on, like it, obviously, tell people, help share it around. We want to see lives touched and changed. That's what our heartbeat is. And so thank you for joining us on the live stream. On Tuesday, we do have the real questions, so send in questions if there's things that you want us to talk about. And thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time on Heart.